Hello and welcome to the 28th chapter in this series, Programming Simple Flappy Robin for Android using Cocos2dx. So, first things first, inside crobin.cpp, the tube collision box, here's another thing I found before I released the app that was incorrect, that I didn't mention last video, and that is, you probably already spotted, but I hard-coded here the pixels for the adjusting of the bounding box. Well, of course, these need scaling in the y direction and also multiplying by our scale factor. Otherwise, again, this will not be the same collision detection irrespective of resolution. I've also changed the values as well a little bit, tweaked them a little bit to make the collisions look a little bit better. I mean, obviously using a rectangle isn't ideal, but it'll do for this tutorial. But now I sort of did a bit of testing of the different ways it collides, and that was sort of the best I found anyway, doing it in this way. Okay then, so now that's done, we can get on with sort of the next part, or the final part of cleaning up the gameplay a little bit before we start looking at the settings and also adding those little red seeds on that are in the release version. Inside hello world scene.h add, and I've already added a couple of new variables. One is a float called last get under y, and one is an int called last tube type. And I'll explain what we're going to do in this video. The first thing is, it would be nice not to have the tubes repeated. So if we have a pair of tubes, then the next one should be a single tube from top to bottom or bottom to top, and the same for the others as well, so that we get some kind of variety. Because I noticed on the game it's possible at the moment, if you're unlucky with the random numbers, to have 3 or 4, say, tubes going from bottom up to the middle, all sitting side by side. And well, that's fairly easy to get through and not very interesting gameplay. So we're going to use this last tube type to make sure that when we look at our random tube generation, that we don't generate the same type that we've just generated. To do that, we need to have some constants, as always, which means inside constants we'll define k-tube type, and I'll just put upper and put this as a 0, and we're going to generate lower, pair, and none. So just upper, and then we want pair and the lower can be a 1, the pair can be a 2, and the none can be a 3. And inside hello world scene.cpp, inside the start game function now, I'm just going to say that the last tube type is equal to k-tube, and there should be a type none here. So that's that initialized like so. We'll sort the rest out in the tube spawning in a minute, because there's something else we need to look at, and that is this float, which I called last get under y. And the point of this is if you imagine a tube coming from the top downwards in the screen, and say it goes quite far down, so the robin needs to go very low near the floor to get under it. If the next tube then is one that starts from the bottom of the screen and goes upwards, if it's too high up, then the robin won't be able to get over it, no matter how quickly we press the screen. So I did some testing here and found that the sort of sweet spot for that was around 180 pixels. So we'll make a constant called define, and we'll call it k-tube. I called it max up pixels, so that later on I would never understand what it meant. And I said 180 times scale y times the get scale factor as well, so that it's all scaled nicely for us. But I found 180 pixels on our sort of standard target resolution was as much as you could get if you really thrashed the robin before the next tube has arrived, if it spawned at the minimum spawn time. And what we'll do is then, we'll record each time we've had to go under a tube, we'll set the value as this last get under y. If we've gone over a tube, we'll just set it to the middle of the screen, which means we don't have any restrictions whatever we generate the next time round, because we'll be generating a top to bottom or a tube pair anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So now we're bearing that in mind, we can go into hello world scene.cpp and actually start editing things a little bit. The first place we need to go is this spawn new tubes here. You can see that I've already changed the random chance now from a 4 to a 3. So because I want now an equal chance of each type, because what we're going to do is we're going to write an infinite while loop, which actually keeps looping until we've generated something that's different to the previous tube type that we generated. Hopefully that you'll see in the code here what exactly I mean by that. So I'll say then that if our last tube type, last tube type is equal to k-tube type upper, and our chance is equal to 1, because you remember further down here, if our chance is 1, then we generate an upper. So now what we're saying is whoops, I put y and not while. If the last tube we generated is an upper, and our chance we generated this time is to generate another upper, well, we don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to generate our chance, basically, and the number hopefully will be different. If it's not, then the while loop will go again and again and again until it is either a 2 or a 3, which it will obviously be at some point. So when we've done that, we now need a good old else if, and we're just going to do exactly the same thing as you can probably imagine for the pair and the lower type. So if we say type lower and our chance equals 2, otherwise if it's type pair and our chance was equal to 3, then again generate the random. Otherwise what we've got is some kind of combination which says we're going to generate a different tube type to what the previous tube type was, and in which case we just break out of the while loop because our chance is okay. And that's actually all we need to do inside here to make sure we spawn the tubes correctly. Now we need to do a little bit more fiddling about though inside the spawn upper and lower. So the first thing we'll say in here now is we'll say that the last tube type is equal to, and now we want to ask, do we have an upper? So is upper equal to true? If it is, then the last tube type is obviously k-tube type upper. Otherwise it's k-tube type lower, because that's the last type we will well, for the next time round we'll set the current last type as the type we're currently generating. The other thing I've done for the gameplay is changed these max and mins around a bit now that we're generating the tubes properly. So I've actually said that if it's an upper, so it's going from top to bottom, then we want k single gap top as the max y if it's not an upper. Otherwise we want middle y, because I noticed that the gaps weren't hard at all. And then in terms of y min, we want k single gap bottom, otherwise middle y, like so, to move things around like this. So this gets us a much more difficult sort of pattern of tubes for the robin to go through. The next thing we want to check, however, we want to say that if our tube type now is a lower tube, so we say if is upper equals false, we want to check that we're not having to get up over this with too much of an increase in y, so this 180 pixels. So we'll say that if the y max, so the y max that we've now set minus the last get under y, so if the difference between where we've got to get to now and the last get under y is greater than our k-tube up max pixels, then our robin probably isn't going to be able to make it, no matter how hard we hammer the screen. So we'll now set our y max equal to this then. So we'll just simply say that our y max then is equal to our last get under y plus the max up pixels, like so. And this guarantees it then that we can make this gap. Even though it might look tricky, we will be able to make it because I managed to do it when I was testing, so anybody can, I guess. So the next thing we need to look at is actually to set this value now for the current tube, because obviously if we've got then an upper type tube from top to bottom, so we'll say if is upper, then now what we can say now is that our last get under y is now equal to our y position of the tube, like so. Otherwise we'll just set this then equal, like I said, to middle y, because it doesn't really matter. That'll guarantee that we'll not have to do any adjustments for the next one, so I'll just set this to middle y. And that's all we need to do then for making sure that we set our tube type, we've got some good range of gaps, but we haven't got anything that's impossible for the robin to get over. Inside the tube pair, things obviously are a lot easier. We just need to set the last tube type equal to tube type pair, so k-tube type pair, like so. And the other thing we need to do is set the last get under then equal to the top y here that the robin needs to get under, so the top y of the y position of the tube pair, like so. And that's all we need to do there, and then spawn a tube is called as normal. Last but not least, the last thing we need to do is set the last tube type inside the game start to tube type none. So in here, and whoops, I forgot to delete it out of my preparation, it's already set inside here, but we want to set the last tube type 2k tube type none inside here. And actually the other thing we need to initialize, of course, which I have forgotten to initialize, is the last get under y. We can set also in the game start. Where is it? It is here. We can set to the middle y as well, to make sure that we don't have any funny business going on with the values in there when we haven't initialized it. And last but not least, when we've got our label here for the restart label, tap the robin to restart, we'll actually set this visible to true to start with when the app first starts up. So that should be all the changes we need to make. I'm going to fade the video out and export the file as usual, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, one thing I've just realized, which you'll have also realized when I came to compile, is the app actually didn't compile because I had the scale y written here rather than get scale y. I'll just click build and build that again and make sure it builds before I try and make. Okay, so everything is built, and now I'll just extract the application again. Sorry about that. Okay, so here we are then with the application ready. We've got tap the robin to where it says restart. At the moment maybe I should have start there. So let's tap the robin and have a look what kind of tubes we have coming now. I can see already that the scheme is quite a bit more difficult there. We've got some kind of overlap already with our robin racing along. Don't crash. And good, that's already looking a lot better. The gaps are looking good, and the variation in the tubes and pattern it has to get over is a lot more difficult than it was at the end of the last video. So the gameplay is looking a lot better. I'll just let that drop. Okay then, good. So application looking good and running relatively well. The only thing that's remaining to do now is the next video will actually do what I promised we would 3 videos ago, and that's actually save our effects volume settings and things like that, and then we need to add in those red little seeds, and then we're actually at the same point that we are with the released app that's at the moment available on the Play Store. So again, I apologize for this video and the previous video being a bit bitty and not very well structured, but I had to get the app actually ready to release, and I had to actually program everything in, and it's quite difficult to go backwards and find all the little bits that you've changed whilst you were play testing, etc. But I think I've managed to do that now. Please do download the app and just give it a nice review or something like that, or if you hate it, give it a 1-star review. I suppose it doesn't really matter, but I hope anyway that it's helped so far. And once we've got the seeds in and we've got the settings being saved, what I'll do then is I'll do a video on how you actually publish the app on the Play Store and how you do beta testing and things like that. So thanks very much for watching. Comments, questions, criticisms welcome as always on YouTube.